On February 1st, 1968, two Memphis garbage collectors, Echo Cole and Robert Walker, who were seeking shelter from the rain, were crushed to death by a malfunctioning truck. 11 days later, frustrated by the city's response to the latest event and a long pattern of neglect and abuse of its black employees, 1,300 black men from the Memphis Department of Public Works went on strike. Sanitation workers, led by garbage collector turned union organizer T.O. Jones, and supported by the president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Jerry Worth, demanded recognition of their union, better safety standards, and a decent wage.
Race has been the most important topic in Memphis since 1968. I was in 8th grade in 1968, and I remember it like it was yesterday. At the time, the sanitation workers were not treated fairly. There were these garbage machines where they collected garbage in all the neighborhoods. You would take a garbage can out front and sanitation workers would come and pick up the garbage, and the trucks that they were on were unsafe. The white people were paid when it rained. The African American people were not paid. The white people were given benefits. The black people, no benefits.
The union, which had been granted a charter by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees in 1964, had attempted a strike in 1966, but failed in large part because workers were unable to arouse the support of Memphis's religious community or middle class. Conditions for black sanitation workers worsened when Henry Loeb became mayor in January of 1968. Loeb refused to take unattended trucks out of service or pay overtime when men were forced to work late-night shifts. Sanitation workers earned wages so low that many were on welfare and hundreds relied on food stamps to feed their families. Hauling trash, sometimes in the pouring rain, was a taxing and dirty job. Their compensation was only 65 cents per hour. During his early political career, Loeb positioned himself as a vocal opponent of integration. Serving as Public Works Commissioner starting in 1956, Loeb got himself elected to his first term as mayor in 1959, declaring during the campaign, "I would fight any integration order all the way." Further, he publicly tried to prevent the election of black politician Russell Sugarman as Public Works Commissioner. This history made it easy for the black community to portray Loeb as a symbol of white oppression during the height of the strike.
Of a municipality may not strike for any purpose. This, of course, includes employees of the Public Works Department.
Born into a wealthy and socially prominent family in Memphis, Loeb's upbringing made him blind to the hardships facing many of the striking sanitation workers. During his youth, he attended Phillips Academy and Brown University, both elite schools in the Northeast. As for the family fortune, Loeb's grandfather had started a very successful laundry business, and by the time Henry became active in political life, the business had grown into a small commercial empire, employing hundreds of people in Memphis. Advertisement for Loeb barbecue joints and laundry cleaners appeared regularly in two prominent local papers, the Commercial Appeal and the Press Scimitar. All this privilege and financial security made it difficult for Henry Loeb to understand the precarious existence of the men working for the city sanitation department.
The mayor at the time, Loeb, Henry Loeb, decided that they would not give the union checkoff. Wealthy men in the area said, "We'll pay what the sanitation workers want in wages." But the mayor said, "You can pay it all day long, but we're not going to give them the union checkoff." By not giving them the right to be represented by the union, it completely took away their rights because the union would protect them in those days.
I also know that Mayor Henry Loeb of Memphis did not do us any favors with his heavy-handed treatment of the sanitation workers. And some reporter for the local paper took a photograph of under Loeb's desk was a shotgun. And that, of course, did nothing to help the community for peace at all. It made Loeb look like a bigot and a hypocrite. Some great philosopher said, anytime you try to make peaceful evolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And that's what happened in Memphis when the sanitation workers felt they were being oppressed, and Mayor Loeb sent the police out after them with billy clubs.
As a sanitation worker himself, he fought for the right to unionize, eventually starting a union that was unrecognized by the city. Working conditions were often dangerous. There were no breaks, nowhere to eat, change clothes, or use the restroom. His activism led to the dismissal in 1963, with the city citing inefficiency as the main reason. Jones's initial outrage and leadership inspired his colleagues to organize and take action in the 1968 campaign, which included the famous "I'm a Man" signs as a statement of dignity and individual rights, and ultimately led to a better wage and more equal rights for black sanitation workers.
Mr. T.O. Jones, who seems to be the spokesman for the union and a former sanitation employee worker.
The strike kicked off successfully with a several hundred-person sit-in, which led the city council to acknowledge the sanitation workers union and support raises. After the first strike, African Americans organized daily marches up and down Main Street. On February 23rd, violence erupted in the city for the first time. The police responded by spraying mace into the faces of marchers, including a number of ministers. As a result, tension mounted in an already tense city.
Police used riot control gas and nightsticks this afternoon to break up a disturbance among a group of striking garbage men. Part of a group of about 1,000 marchers began rocking a police car, and police waded in.
By early March, the police were arresting strikers and their supporters for sitting in at the city hall and keeping replacement workers from moving garbage trucks. On March 18th, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. arrived in the city to show his support for the workers. At a rally, he told the workers, "Our society must come to respect the sanitation worker. He is as significant as a physician, for if he doesn't do his job, disease is rampant." He returned 10 days later to lead a march. On March 28th, King returned to Memphis to lead over 5,000 people on a march through the city. 20 minutes after it began, a group of young African Americans began breaking windows and looting stores. The police immediately moved in with tear gas and nightsticks. The marchers scattered, running for shelter. As a result of the violence, a curfew was imposed on the city, and over 3,800 National Guardsmen arrived in Memphis to keep order.
Police, with my full sanction, took the necessary action to restore law and order and to protect the lives and property of the citizens of Memphis.
King and two Memphis ministers, James Lawson and Ralph Jackson, held a press conference later that day. They expressed sorrow that a small group had disrupted the march. They also vowed that the protests would continue until a settlement was reached. The next day, National Guardsmen escorted the marchers as they walked up and down Main Street. Some blamed the violence on a local black power group called the Invaders. King resolved to work with them and gained their cooperation for another march to be held on April 5th. King arrived on April 3rd, and as the rain poured outside that night, he delivered his famous "I've been to the mountaintop" speech to a group of sanitation workers. King and his entourage, including Jesse James and Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, were staying in a black-owned motel, the Lorraine. As King stood on the balcony outside his second-floor room the next evening, April 4th, a white supremacist sniper, James O. Ray, who had been stalking King for weeks, shot and killed him with a high-powered rifle from the window of a rooming house across the street.
Shot in the face as he stood alone in the balcony of his hotel room. He died in a hospital an hour later.
The following day, the President of the United States sent a federal negotiator to help settle the strike. This time, the two sides reached agreement on every issue but one. The last obstacle to a settlement was the demand for an immediate pay raise. Negotiators recommended a raise of 10 cents an hour effective May 1st, 1968, with an additional 5 cents per hour on September 1st. The union accepted the proposal. The sanitation strike was eventually settled, with the city agreeing to a higher wage and other changes including recognition of the union, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.